The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation had never seen such panic. In the Great Crystal Chamber on Luminar Prime, representatives from 47 species sat in growing terror as the holographic display showed star system after star system going dark. Ambassador Keith Ra of the Zephyrians stood at the center podium, her usually calm telepathic presence now radiating waves of fear that made nearby species uncomfortable. Her pale blue skin had turned almost white with stress, and the delicate energy patterns that normally danced around her head flickered weakly. "The Devourers have awakened," she announced, her voice carrying both telepathically and through the chamber's translation systems. "After 3,000 years of sleep, they are active again." A collective shudder ran through the assembly. Every species knew the ancient stories, the mechanical horrors that consumed entire worlds, breaking them down into raw materials to build more of themselves. They had appeared once before in galactic history, nearly wiping out all organic life before mysteriously going dormant. The Nefari representative, a massive gas being contained in a specialized environmental suit, spoke first. "Our atmospheric warfare techniques have proven useless against them. They simply adapt to our chemical attacks within hours. Our crystal ship networks cannot penetrate their defenses," added the Luminar delegate, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in anxious patterns. "Their hulls seem to absorb and redirect our energy weapons." Kethra nodded grimly. "Every conventional weapon we possess has failed. Our most advanced battle fleets have been destroyed or converted into raw materials for their expansion. At their current rate of consumption, they will reach the core worlds within 8 standard months." The chamber erupted in frightened chatter. Some species began making preparations to flee to distant galaxies. Others spoke of surrender, hoping the Devourers might spare them if they offered no resistance. "There is one option we have not discussed," Kethra said quietly, her words cutting through the chaos like a blade. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she was about to suggest, and the very thought filled them with almost as much dread as the approaching mechanical army. "The humans," she continued, the word hanging in the air like a curse. "For nearly a century, the Galactic Confederation had been aware of humanity. The strange species from the death world called Earth had been classified as too dangerous for contact. Their planet was a nightmare of extreme weather, deadly predators, and toxic environments that would kill most galactic species within minutes. Yet somehow humans thrived there." "They are barbarians," protested the Vegan delegate, his tree-like form rustling with agitation. "Their entire civilization is built on violence and warfare. They destroy their own environment for resources. They fight each other constantly," added another representative. "Their entire culture celebrates conflict and competition. They are no better than the Devourers themselves." Kethra held up a hand for silence. "Yes, they are violent. Yes, they are primitive by our standards. But they are also survivors. They have faced extinction dozens of times on their own world and somehow always found a way to continue." She activated a new holographic display showing Earth's history. Images of ice ages, asteroid impacts, massive volcanic eruptions, and countless wars flashed before the assembly. Through it all, humanity had not just survived but grown stronger. "Look at their technology," Kethra continued. "It is crude but effective. They build machines designed to function in the worst possible conditions. They create weapons specifically intended to destroy other weapons. Their entire mindset is focused on overcoming impossible odds." "But at what cost?" asked the Aquarian representative, her water-filled suit bubbling with emotion. "They poison their own air and water. They strip-mine their planet. They kill their own species by the millions in their wars. And yet they continue to exist," Kethra replied. "While we have built a peaceful civilization based on cooperation and advanced technology, they have built a civilization based on adaptation and survival. Perhaps it is time to admit that our way, beautiful as it is, cannot handle every threat." The debate continued for hours. Many species threatened to leave the Confederation rather than associate with the infamous Deathworlders. Others argued that contacting humanity would be like releasing a plague upon the galaxy. Finally, the ancient sage mind of the ethereal collective spoke. It was the oldest consciousness in the Confederation, having lived for over 10,000 years. When it communicated, reality itself seemed to ripple. "The choice is simple," the sage mind said, its words appearing directly in every delegate's mind. "We can maintain our principles and face extinction, or we can compromise our values and survive to rebuild them later." The vote was close, but desperation won. By a margin of 3 votes, the Confederation authorized first contact with humanity. Kethra was chosen to carry the message, despite her obvious reluctance. As the only telepath strong enough to communicate across interstellar distances without technological aid, she was the logical choice. The transmission room was prepared with every defensive system the Confederation possessed. No one knew how humans would react to sudden telepathic contact, and their reputation for violence made everyone nervous. Kethra centered herself and reached out across the void, her consciousness stretching toward the small blue world on the galaxy's rim. What she found there nearly broke her mind. Earth was a chaos of thoughts and emotions unlike anything she had ever experienced. Billions of minds, all thinking different thoughts, feeling different emotions, pursuing different goals. There was no unity, no collective consciousness, just raw individual will multiplied beyond imagination. She found what seemed to be a leader, a human called Admiral Sarah Chen, and carefully made contact. The human's reaction was immediate and startling. Instead of fear or confusion, Chen's mind filled with cold, calculating analysis. Within seconds, she was asking questions about the Devourer's capabilities, their weaknesses, their numbers. How many ships do they have? Chen asked directly into Kethra's mind. Millions, Kethra replied, overwhelmed by the human's intensity. What kind of weapons? Energy beams that can cut through our strongest shields. Self-repairing armor that adapts to any attack. How big are their ships? Some are as large as small moons. There was a pause, then Chen asked the question that chilled Kethra to her core. How do we kill them? Not how to negotiate with them. Not how to hide from them. Not how to appease them. How to kill them, we do not know if they can be killed, Kethra admitted. Chen's mental response was something between a laugh and a growl. Everything can be killed. You just need to find the right way to do it. The conversation continued for an hour. Chen gathered every detail about the Devourers that the Confederation possessed, analyzing each piece of information with a strategic mind that impressed and terrified Kethra. When the communication ended, Kethra collapsed from exhaustion. But the message had been delivered and humanity's response was already being prepared. As she recovered, Kethra wondered if the Confederation had just saved itself or doomed the galaxy to a different kind of horror. The humans were coming, and she was no longer sure which was more frightening, the mechanical precision of the Devourers or the chaotic adaptability of the species they had just awakened. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by the best military minds humanity had to offer. The circular chamber buzzed with activity as officers, scientists and engineers worked at dozens of stations, analyzing every scrap of information the aliens had provided. Sir, the Confederation delegation has arrived, reported her aide Colonel Martinez. They're requesting permission to land. Chen nodded without looking up from the tactical display. 3-dimensional models of Devourer ships rotated slowly in the air before her, their mechanical details highlighted in red. Let them land, but maintain full security protocols. I want to know everything about these visitors. The alien ship that descended from orbit was beautiful in a way that human technology could never match. It seemed to be grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that shimmered with internal light. The contrast with the angular, functional architecture of the human military base was striking. Ambassador Kethra emerged from the ship accompanied by 2 other aliens. She moved carefully, still weak from the long-distance telepathic communication. The humans had insisted on face-to-face contact, apparently not trusting mental communication alone. General Patricia Okonkwo met them at the landing pad. She was a tall, imposing woman, whose calm demeanor barely concealed the intensity beneath. The aliens were surprised by her direct approach. Welcome to Earth, Okonkwo said simply. The Admiral is waiting. As they walked through the base, the aliens could not help but notice the differences between human and Confederation technology. Everything was built for durability rather than elegance. Thick walls, redundant systems, and backup power sources were everywhere. It was as if humans expected their own technology to be destroyed and had planned accordingly. The war room itself shocked them. Dozens of humans worked frantically at stations, their faces showing none of the panic that had filled the Confederation assembly. Instead, there was a focused intensity that reminded Kethra uncomfortably of predators preparing for a hunt. Admiral Chen turned as they entered. She was smaller than the general, but her presence filled the room. Her dark eyes studied the aliens with an intelligence that made them nervous. "Ambassador," Chen said with a slight nod, "thank you for coming. We've been analyzing your data." "You work quickly," Kethra replied, still adjusting to speaking aloud instead of using telepathy. "We have to," Chen said matter-of-factly. "Show them the projections, Martinez." The holographic display changed, showing star charts with projected devourer movements. Red lines traced paths through space, with timestamps marking the mechanical army's progress. "Based on their current speed and consumption rate, they'll reach our solar system in 14 months, Chen explained. "That gives us time to prepare." "Prepare?" Kethra asked. "Admiral, these machines have destroyed entire fleets. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy cannot stop them." Chen smiled, and the expression was more frightening than reassuring. "Ambassador, the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy have never faced an existential threat on their home planets. We have. Multiple times." She gestured to another display, this one showing Earth's history. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Asteroid impacts that blocked out the sun. Volcanic eruptions that poisoned the atmosphere. Plagues that killed half our population. We've been fighting extinction since we first stood upright. "But the Devourers are not a natural disaster," protested the Luminar delegate, her crystalline form flickering with worry. "They are an intelligent enemy that adapts to any attack." "Even better," said General Okonkwo, stepping forward. "Natural disasters don't make mistakes. Intelligent enemies do." The aliens exchanged glances. The human confidence was both inspiring and disturbing. These beings spoke of facing mechanical horrors as if it were just another problem to solve. "What do you need from us?" Chen asked. "Need?" Kethra was confused. "Resources, technology, intelligence," Chen clarified. "What can you provide to help us fight these things?" "Admiral, I think you misunderstand," Kethra said carefully. "We are not asking you to join our fight. We are asking you to save us." The room fell silent. Every human present turned to stare at the aliens. Then slowly, Chen began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. "You want us to fight your war for you," she said. "The Confederation lacks the aggressive capabilities that humans possess," Kethra admitted. "Our civilizations are built on peace and cooperation. We do not have the military experience to face such a threat." "I see," Chen said, her voice becoming cold. "You've spent centuries avoiding us because we're too violent and primitive. But now that you need violence, you come asking for our help." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. The aliens realized they had made a serious diplomatic error. "However," Chen continued, "that doesn't matter. These machines are coming for us whether we help you or not. So we'll fight them. Not for you, but for ourselves." "You would help us?" Kethra asked hopefully. "We'll work with you," Chen corrected. "But understand this, humans fight to win. Not to minimize casualties, not to preserve infrastructure, not to maintain moral superiority. We fight to completely destroy our enemies." The alien delegates looked at each other nervously. They were beginning to understand why their species had avoided contact with humanity. "What do you need from us?" Kethra asked. "Everything," Chen replied. "Ship designs, weapon schematics, battle reports, sensor data. We need to know everything about these devourers and everything about your technology. Some of our technology is quite advanced," the Luminar delegate offered. "Perhaps it could be adapted to human methods." "We'll see," said Colonel Martinez, taking charge of the technical briefing. "But understand that we'll modify anything you give us to fit our needs. Your energy weapons might become projectile weapons. Your shield generators might become explosive devices." "Explosive devices?" Kethra was horrified. "Everything is a weapon if you use it right," Martinez explained matter-of-factly. Over the next several hours, human engineers and scientists swarmed over the alien technology and data. Their approach shocked the Confederation delegates. Where alien scientists would spend months carefully studying a new device, humans would simply take it apart to see how it worked. "Are they always so destructive in their research?" the Nefri delegate asked nervously, as he watched a human engineer disassemble a gravity generator with what appeared to be a hammer. "We learn by doing," explained Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief science officer. "Your people seem to learn by thinking. We prefer a more hands-on approach." Meanwhile, Admiral Chen was already making strategic plans. Captain Marcus Torres, commander of the human fleet, was called in to discuss deployment options. "How many ships can we field?" Chen asked. "Operational, About 200 heavy cruisers, 500 destroyers, and 1,000 support vessels, Torres replied. But most of them weren't designed for this kind of fight. Then we redesign them, Chen said simply. Strip out everything non-essential. Add more armor, more weapons, more redundancy. I want every ship to be able to fight even after taking massive damage. That will take months, Torres warned. Then we better get started. As the meeting continued, the alien delegates began to understand that humanity was not just accepting their request for help, they were taking over the entire war effort. Human efficiency and human ruthlessness were reshaping the conflict before it had even begun. Admiral, Kethra said during a brief break, I must ask, are you not afraid? Chen looked at her with those dark, intense eyes. Ambassador, fear is what keeps you alive when everything is trying to kill you. We've been afraid our entire existence. The difference is we've learned to use that fear as a weapon. As the aliens prepared to return to their ship, they carried with them detailed human battle plans and several human advisors who would coordinate the war effort. But they also carried a growing uncertainty about what they had unleashed. Humanity was mobilizing for war with a speed and efficiency that impressed even their critics. But the aliens were beginning to realize that in seeking salvation from one mechanical horror, they might have awakened something even more dangerous. The mining colony at Zarian 7 had been peaceful until 3 days ago. Now it was being consumed piece by machines that moved with mechanical precision through the asteroid fields. Captain Marcus Torres watched from the bridge of the human destroyer, relentless, as his mixed fleet approached the battle zone. Around him, alien ships moved in perfect formation, their elegant designs gleaming in the distant starlight. The human vessels looked crude by comparison, all angles and armor plating, but Torres preferred them that way. Contact on sensors, reported Lieutenant Kim from the tactical station. Devourer ships, approximately 30 units, various sizes. Torres nodded and opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Torres. Remember the plan. Let our allies take the first shot. Admiral Zethka of the Luminar fleet was in command of the combined force. Her crystalline ship, the Harmony of Light, took point as they approached the enemy. Torres watched as the alien commander tried to establish communication with the Devourers, following standard Confederation protocol. Unidentified vessels, Zethka broadcast. You are consuming a peaceful mining colony. Withdraw immediately or we will be forced to defend the civilian population. The response was immediate and violent. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the Devourer ships, striking the lead Luminar vessels. The alien shields flared and held, but Torres could see they were already adapting, becoming less effective with each hit. Confederation fleet, implement defensive pattern 7, Zethka ordered. Her ships moved into a complex formation, designed to maximize shield efficiency and minimize target exposure. The Devourers responded by changing their attack patterns. Within minutes, they had analyzed the alien formation and adjusted their tactics accordingly. Torres watched as elegant Confederation ships were systematically disabled, their crews forced to retreat. Human ships, please assist, came Zethka's strained voice over the comm. Torres smiled grimly. All human vessels implement Plan Chaos. Random attack patterns, no coordination, make it up as you go. The human ships broke formation and charged directly at the enemy. Instead of elegant maneuvers, they simply pointed their ships at the nearest Devourer and accelerated to ramming speed. The lead human destroyer, Defiant, was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez. She had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment, direct assault on the largest Devourer vessel. All power to forward shields, she ordered. Arm nuclear warheads for proximity detonation. Her crew worked with practiced efficiency. Unlike the aliens, humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of controlled violence. Every system on the ship was designed with combat in mind. The Devourers tried to adapt to the human attack, but there was nothing to adapt to. The humans were not using sophisticated tactics or advanced technology. They were simply trying to get close enough to cause maximum damage before being destroyed. Range, 5,000 kilometers, reported the weapons officer. Fire everything, Vasquez ordered. Nuclear warheads detonated against Devourer hulls. Kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through mechanical armor. Energy weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat were used at point-blank range. The humans traded damage for effect, accepting losses that would horrify any Confederation commander. The destroyer Defiant took a direct hit that vaporized half its hull, but Vasquez kept fighting with the remaining systems. Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, her damage control officer reported. We're losing atmosphere. Seal the compromised sections, Vasquez replied calmly. Continue the attack. The Devourer ship they were fighting began to show damage. Its self-repair systems were struggling to keep up with the chaotic human assault. More importantly, it seemed confused by the human tactics. It's not adapting, reported the tactical officer with surprise. The enemy AI seems unable to predict our next move. That's because we don't know our next move either, Vasquez replied. Hard to predict insanity. Meanwhile, Torres was coordinating the broader battle from his command ship. He watched as human vessels used tactics that would never appear in any military manual. The destroyer Vengeance actually rammed a Devourer ship, its crew surviving in protected compartments while their vessel's momentum drove them through the enemy hull. Boarding parties. Prepare for deployment, Torres ordered. This was the part that truly horrified the alien observers. Humans in armored suits were actually planning to board the Devourer ships and fight the mechanical horrors hand-to-hand. Sergeant Maria Santos led the first boarding party through the breach, created by the Vengeance. Inside the Devourer ship, they found corridors filled with mechanical defenders that moved with inhuman precision. Contact front, Santos called out as spider-like repair bots scuttled toward them. Engaging with kinetics. The humans fought through the ship's corridors using weapons that seemed primitive by galactic standards. Explosive charges, projectile weapons, and improvised clubs were their tools of choice. But they were effective against an enemy that had been designed to fight energy-based civilizations. These things don't know how to handle physical impact, reported Corporal Johnson as he smashed a repair bot with his rifle butt. Their programming assumes all attacks will be energy-based. Santos grinned inside her helmet. Then let's give them a physics lesson. The boarding party fought deeper into the ship, learning as they went. The Devourers were incredibly sophisticated, but they had been designed by a species that fought like the Confederation. They were not prepared for enemies who used brute force and improvisation. Found something, called out Private Chen from up ahead. Looks like a control node. Santos looked at the mechanical structure, a complex array of crystalline computers and energy conduits. Can you shut it down? Chen studied it for a moment, then pulled out a shaped charge. I can shut it down permanently. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the Devourer ship. Systems began failing throughout the vessel as its central coordination was disrupted. Back on the Relentless, Torres watched as the enemy ship began to drift. Its weapon fire became erratic, then stopped entirely. All ships concentrate fire on the disabled vessel, he ordered. Let's see if we can learn something from the wreckage. The combined human and alien fleet destroyed the crippled Devourer, but not before human salvage teams managed to retrieve several intact components. More importantly, they had learned something crucial about their enemy. Debrief in the main conference room, Torres announced. All senior officers, including our alien allies. Admiral Zeth-Ka arrived looking shaken. Her crystalline form was dim with exhaustion and trauma. She had lost 3 ships and nearly 100 crew members in the battle. Your tactics are effective, she admitted reluctantly. But the cost? Acceptable, Torres replied matter-of-factly. We destroyed 6 enemy vessels and captured valuable intelligence. That's a good trade ratio. You lost an entire destroyer and half your boarding party? Zeth-Ka protested. And we learned that the Devourers can't adapt to unpredictable tactics, Torres countered. That's worth 100 ships. Lieutenant Commander Vasquez, who had survived the destruction of her ship thanks to emergency evacuation pods, presented her analysis of the battle. The enemy AI systems are incredibly advanced, she reported, but they're designed for logical warfare. They expect patterns they can analyze and counter. When we use random tactics and accept heavy losses, they can't compute an appropriate response. It's like fighting a chess master by eating the pieces, added Sergeant Santos, who had led the successful boarding action. They don't have programming for that. The alien officers looked disturbed by the human attitude toward casualties and destruction, but they could not argue with the results. For the first time since the Devourers had awakened, someone had actually defeated them in battle. What's our next move? Asked Colonel Martinez, who had been observing the battle from the command ship. Torres looked at the tactical display, where more Devourer fleets were marked in red. We keep hitting them before they can adapt, Fast random attacks with no pattern they can predict. And if they do learn to counter our tactics? Zethka asked. Torres smiled that cold human smile that was becoming familiar to their alien allies. Then we'll come up with new tactics. Humans are very good at finding new ways to break things. As the mixed fleet prepared to move to the next battle zone, the alien crews were left to contemplate what they had witnessed. The humans had won, but their methods were unlike anything in Confederation military doctrine. They fight like the universe is trying to kill them, observed one Nefari officer. His captain nodded slowly. Perhaps it is, and perhaps that is exactly what we need right now. The battle at Zerion 7 was over, but it was only the beginning. The real war against the Devourers was just starting, and humanity was teaching the galaxy new lessons about survival at any cost. The asteroid field at Sigma 9 had become humanity's first forward operating base, and it horrified every alien who saw it. Where Confederation military installations were marvels of engineering elegance, the human base was a collection of functional brutality carved directly into the rocks. Colonel James Harrison stood in the command center, a reinforced cavern deep inside the largest asteroid. Around him, human engineers worked constantly to expand and fortify their position. The air recycling systems were loud and crude, but they worked even when half destroyed. Everything was built with the assumption that it would be attacked. "Sir, we have the latest intelligence reports," said Major Williams, handing Harrison a data pad. "The Devourers have changed their approach patterns. They're avoiding direct confrontation and trying to circle around our positions." Harrison nodded grimly. It had been 3 months since the first battle, and the mechanical enemy was learning. Slowly, but learning nonetheless. "They're starting to recognize that we're different from the Confederation forces," he mused. "Good. That means our tactics are working." The human strategy had evolved since Zerion 7. Instead of meeting the Devourers in open battle, they were implementing what Harrison called the Deathworlder doctrine, a military philosophy born from humanity's harsh evolutionary history. Ambassador Keth Ra materialized in the command center, her telepathic projection allowing her to communicate across interstellar distances. She looked tired and strained, the constant coordination between human and alien forces taking its toll. "Colonel, the Confederation Council is requesting another update on your methods," she said carefully. "There have been concerns raised about your tactics," Harrison almost smiled. "What kind of concerns?" "The civilian casualties at the Deneb station," Keth Ra replied. "Your forces evacuated the civilian population, then used the station as bait to lure in a Devourer fleet before destroying the entire system." "Standard scorched earth tactics," Harrison explained matter-of-factly. "We saved 8,000 civilians and eliminated a major enemy staging area. The station was going to be consumed anyway." "But the economic impact," Keth Ra protested. "That station represented centuries of development. The mining rights alone were worth—" "Nothing," Harrison interrupted. "Economic value means nothing if everyone is dead. This is war, Ambassador, not a business negotiation." The philosophical gap between human and alien thinking had become a constant source of tension. The Confederation species had spent millennia developing civilizations based on preservation and cooperation. The concept of deliberately destroying valuable resources to deny them to an enemy was alien to them. "Show her the projection models," Harrison told Major Williams. The holographic display activated, showing the galaxy with current Devourer positions marked in red. Human tactical analysis had divided space into zones of control, contested areas, and sacrifice zones. "This is how humans think about war," Harrison explained. "We identify what we can hold, what we can contest, and what we have to give up. Everything in the sacrifice zones gets destroyed rather than allowing the enemy to use it." Keth Ra studied the projection with growing alarm. Nearly a quarter of Confederation space was marked as sacrifice zones. "You would destroy entire star systems?" she asked. "If necessary," Harrison replied. "Better a dead galaxy than a Devourer galaxy." This was the core of the Deathworlder doctrine, survival at any cost. Humans had evolved on a planet that regularly tried to kill them, and they had learned to accept terrible losses if it meant continuing to exist. "Captain Torres wants to brief you on the latest fleet modifications," Williams reported. Torres entered the command center, his uniform bearing new scars from recent battles. The human fleet commander had become something of a legend among both human and alien forces, known for his willingness to take impossible risks. "We've finished retrofitting the heavy cruisers," he reported. "Stripped out all non-essential systems, added redundant armor and weapons. They're not pretty, but they can take a beating and keep fighting." "Casualties?" Harrison asked. 12% crew loss during the modifications," Torres replied. "Mostly from testing new systems under combat conditions." Kethra was horrified. "You lost crew members during modifications?" "We test everything under live fire conditions," Torres explained. "Better to lose a few people during testing than lose entire ships during battle." This casual acceptance of training casualties was another aspect of human warfare that disturbed their allies. The Confederation military spent years in simulation training to avoid any risk to personnel. Humans preferred to train in actual combat conditions, accepting that some people would die learning. "The new doctrine is spreading through the fleet," Torres continued. "Every ship captain now has authorization to make independent tactical decisions, including the use of nuclear weapons." "Independent nuclear authorization?" Kethra asked weakly. "Devourers adapt too quickly for centralized command," Harrison explained. "By the time orders reach a ship in combat, the tactical situation has changed. Our commanders need to be able to respond instantly, even if it means using maximum force." The human command philosophy was the opposite of Confederation doctrine. Where aliens preferred careful coordination and minimal necessary force, humans gave their field commanders broad authority to use whatever weapons they deemed appropriate. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Kepler front," reported Lieutenant Commander Vasquez, who had been promoted after her actions at Zerion 7. "The Devourers are showing new behavior patterns." The tactical display shifted to show the latest battle zone. Human and Devourer forces were engaged in a running fight through an asteroid belt, but something was different. "They're retreating," Vasquez continued. "For the first time, we've seen Devourers actually withdraw from a battle instead of fighting to complete destruction." Harrison studied the data with intense interest. "They're learning to be afraid." "Mechanical intelligences cannot experience fear," Kethra objected. "They can learn survival behaviors that look like fear," Harrison corrected. "We've made fighting humans costly enough that their programming now considers retreat a viable option." This was perhaps the most significant development in the war. The Devourers had been programmed by their creators to be fearless, relentless, and completely committed to their mission. But humans had introduced variables their creators had never anticipated. "How do we use this?" Torres asked. Harrison smiled, and the expression was becoming more frightening with each passing battle. "We make them more afraid. Psychological warfare." "Psychological warfare against machines?" Kethra asked. "Against their programming," Harrison clarified. "We make the cost of fighting humans so high that their survival algorithms override their mission parameters." The plan that emerged was uniquely human in its brutal simplicity. Instead of trying to destroy every Devourer ship, they would focus on making examples. Human forces would identify isolated enemy units and overwhelm them with such devastating force that other Devourer units would learn to avoid human fleets entirely. "We're going to make them spread out," Harrison explained to his senior staff. "Force them to commit more resources to avoiding us than to their primary mission. And if they adapt to our psychological tactics?" asked Major Williams. "Then we adapt faster," Harrison replied. "Humans are better at changing tactics than any AI system. We've been doing it for millions of years." Over the following weeks, the Deathworlder doctrine was implemented across all human forces. The results were immediate and dramatic. Devourer fleets began avoiding direct confrontation with human ships, instead trying to work around them. But this created new opportunities for human commanders. Captain Sarah Kim, commanding the destroyer Persistent, developed a tactic she called herding. Her ships would position themselves to force Devourer fleets into predetermined killing zones where concentrated firepower could destroy them. "It's like hunting pack animals," she explained to the mixed fleet commanders. "You don't chase them directly. You guide them where you want them to go." The alien officers were disturbed by the hunting metaphors that filled human tactical discussions. Humans spoke of war in terms that reminded everyone of their predatory evolutionary history. But the tactics worked. Month by month, the Devourer advance slowed, then stopped, then began to reverse. For the first time since the mechanical army had awakened, they were losing territory instead of gaining it. "The Confederation Council wants to know when this will end," Kethra reported during one of her regular visits. Harrison looked at her with those cold human eyes that had become so familiar. "When every last devourer is scrap metal," he said simply. "And after that?" She pressed. Harrison paused, considering the question. Around them, human technicians worked on weapons designed to kill machines that had been considered unkillable. The tools of war had become humanity's primary contribution to galactic civilization. "After that, Ambassador," he said quietly, "you'll have to decide whether the cure was worse than the disease." The war was turning in humanity's favor, but the cost was becoming clear. The galaxy was learning what humans were capable of when their survival was threatened, and that knowledge would change everything, long after the last Devourer was destroyed. The Devourer world ship hung at the edge of the galaxy like a mechanical star, its surface crawling with construction activity that had continued for millennia. It was larger than most moons, a sphere of metal and machinery that served as both factory and fortress for the mechanical army. General Patricia Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, studying the massive enemy vessel through the view screen. Around her, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled waited for her orders. 200 human ships backed by nearly 500 alien vessels, prepared for what everyone knew would be the final battle. "Intelligence reports. Colonel Harrison," she ordered. Harrison materialized on the bridge via holographic projection from his command post. His face showed the strain of months of constant warfare, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. "The world ship is heavily defended," he reported. "Energy shields that could stop a star's output, defensive platforms numbering in the thousands, and an estimated 10 million Devourer units stationed throughout the vessel." "Weaknesses?" Okonkwo asked. "The ship's size works against it," Harrison replied. "It's too big to maneuver effectively, and the Devourers have concentrated all their remaining forces there. If we can disable it, we end the war in one strike." Admiral Zethka of the Luminar fleet joined the briefing, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. Over the months of fighting alongside humans, she had learned to respect their tactical abilities, but their final plan still horrified her. "General, the Confederation Council has asked me to present alternative strategies," she said carefully. "Perhaps a siege approach or negotiations." "There are no alternatives," Okonkwo interrupted. "The Devourers have concentrated their entire remaining force at that world ship. This is our only chance to finish them completely." The human plan was typically direct and typically insane. They would use their fastest ships to ram through the defensive perimeter at faster than light speeds, then conduct a ground assault on the world ship's interior. The goal was to reach the central control systems and turn the Devourer's own replication technology against them. "The casualty projections," Zethka began, "are acceptable," Okonkwo finished. 70% losses in the initial assault, 90% losses for the ground teams. But if we succeed, the war ends today. Captain Torres commanded the assault fleet, 12 modified destroyers stripped down for maximum speed and acceleration. Their mission was to punch through the defensive perimeter and deliver the ground teams to the world ship's surface. "Remember," Torres addressed his fleet, "we only need to get the ground teams through. Once they're deployed, our job is done. Fight as long as you can, but the mission comes first." The assault began with a coordinated attack by the alien fleets. Hundreds of energy beams lanced out from Confederation ships, testing the world ship's defenses. The return fire was devastating, but it served its purpose by revealing the defensive patterns. "Defensive platforms are focusing on the alien fleet," reported Lieutenant Kim from the tactical station. "Their attention is divided. All human ships, implement final approach," Torres ordered. The 12 destroyers accelerated to faster than light speeds, their enhanced engines screaming under the strain. The Devourers tried to intercept them, but human ships were moving too fast and too unpredictably to target effectively. The destroyer, Relentless, was the first to reach the world ship's surface, ramming directly into a defensive platform and continuing through the outer hull. Torres felt his ship shudder and tear apart around him, but the momentum carried them deep into the mechanical vessel's interior. "Ground teams, deploy immediately," he ordered as his bridge filled with smoke and alarms. Colonel Santos led the first ground team through the breach, her Marines following in powered armor that had been specifically designed for fighting in hostile environments. Behind them came human engineers carrying the specialized equipment needed for their mission. The interior of the world ship was a nightmare of mechanical corridors and automated defenses. Devourer units swarmed toward the breach, their metallic bodies moving with inhuman coordination. "Contact front," Santos called out, as spider-like defenders scuttled down the corridor toward them, engaging with everything we have. The humans fought their way deeper into the ship using tactics that had evolved over months of close-quarters combat. Explosive charges cleared corridors, kinetic weapons punched through mechanical armor, and improvised weapons finished off damaged enemies. "Engineering teams, how long do you need?" Santos asked over the comm. "Give us 30 minutes to reach the control center," replied Chief Engineer Rodriguez. "Another 30 to implement the virus." The virus was humanity's final weapon against the Devourers. Instead of trying to destroy the machines through brute force, human programmers had developed a code that would turn the Devourers' replication systems against themselves. The machines would continue to build, but they would build non-functional units that would eventually consume all available resources. "You heard the man," Santos told her Marines. "Hold this position for 1 hour." The battle that followed was the most intense fighting of the war. Humans armed with primitive weapons faced off against sophisticated mechanical defenders in corridors too narrow for proper maneuvering. They held their ground through sheer determination and the willingness to accept casualties that would break any other species. "Rodriguez, status report," Santos called out as she used her rifle to club a damaged Devourer unit. "Almost there," the engineer replied. "These systems are more complex than we thought, but we're adapting." Meanwhile, on the surface, the space battle raged around the world ship. Human ships continued to ram through the defenses, each one buying precious time for the ground teams. Admiral Chen coordinated the assault from her flagship, watching as ship after ship disappeared from her tactical display. "Human destroyer Defiant is down," reported her tactical officer. "Human destroyer Vengeance is critically damaged but still fighting." "Order all remaining ships to continue the assault," Chen commanded. "The ground teams need more time." Inside the world ship, Rodriguez and his team finally reached the central control chamber. It was a vast space filled with crystalline computers and energy conduits that pulsed with alien technology. "Beginning virus implementation," Rodriguez reported. "This is either going to work perfectly or kill us all very quickly." "Optimistic as always," Santos replied, still fighting to hold the perimeter. Her Marines were down to half strength, but they continued to hold their position through stubborn human persistence. The virus upload took 23 minutes. As the code propagated through the Devourer network, changes began to occur throughout the world ship. Construction bays that had been building new Devourer units started producing deformed, non-functional versions. Repair systems began dismantling functional equipment to build more defective units. "It's working," Rodriguez announced with barely contained excitement. "The replication systems are cascading. They're going to consume themselves." But the Devourers were not passive victims. As their central intelligence recognized the threat, they began a desperate counterattack. Every remaining unit in the world ship converged on the human position. "We've got company," Santos announced as mechanical horrors poured down the corridors toward them. A lot of company. The final battle was everything human warfare represented. Desperate, chaotic, and ultimately successful through sheer refusal to give up. Marines fought with broken weapons and improvised tools. Engineers defended their equipment with whatever they could find. Everyone understood that retreat was not an option. Virus propagation at 70%, Rodriguez reported as explosions echoed through the corridor. "Almost complete," Santos looked at her remaining forces. Less than a quarter of her original team was still operational, and those were mostly wounded. But they had held long enough. "Virus propagation complete," Rodriguez announced. "The cascade is irreversible." Throughout the world ship, Devourer units began to shut down as their support systems failed. The mechanical army that had threatened the galaxy was consuming itself from within, unable to stop the viral code that turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. On the bridge of the Indomitable, General Okonkwo watched as the massive world ship went dark. Weapon systems stopped firing, defensive platforms powered down, and the constant activity on its surface ground to a halt. "All ships, cease fire," she ordered. "Target neutralized." The silence that followed was deafening. After months of constant warfare, the sudden peace felt almost unnatural. Admiral Zeth Ka was the first to speak. "It's over?" It's over, Okonkwo confirmed. The Devourers are finished. The cost had been enormous. Of the 12 human destroyers that had begun the final assault, only 3 had survived. Ground casualties had been even higher, with less than 50 humans making it out of the world ship alive. But they had won. In the weeks that followed, human and alien teams worked together to secure the derelict world ship and ensure that no Devourer units had escaped the cascade failure. They found none. The virus had been completely successful, turning the mechanical army's own efficiency against itself. The formal end-of-war ceremony was held on Luminar Prime, with representatives from every Confederation species in attendance.